I don't want to encroach. All right, are we good? Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Village Council Special Public Budget Meeting. The date is March 7th, 2022, and the time is 5:02 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Bridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of a schedule including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilwoman Perrin. Here. Councilwoman Reynolds.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Here.
Councilman Vagianos.
Here.
And Mayor Knudsen.
Here. Please stand for the flag salute. Please join us in a moment of silence for our men and women serving our nation, all of our first responders, and for hopefully peace everywhere. Thank you. We'll call for public comment. We don't have anyone from the public here, so we'll go right on to our discussion items for the final budget review.
Okay, so this is our final budget review. I'm basically going to have Mr. Rooney take us through the final additional reductions that we had to make in the budget and where we were trying to get to and where we got to, and then we'll set the tax rate, and we'll be done. So it's all yours.
Good evening. So I gave you a handout, and I'll walk you through each page to show you the journey that we took to get to a tax rate that hopefully you will find acceptable. So on page 1, I did a comparison of the municipal property tax increases for the last 3 years. NVT is net valuations taxable. ATBRT, amount to be raised by taxation. So you, excuse me, you take the amount to be raised by taxation and you divide it by the net valuations taxable, and that gives you your tax rate. So in this spreadsheet that I did, using the appropriations all the way to the right under budget proposed 2022, that $55,934,502 represents all the department requests that you heard, you listened to, and we put into the overall budget. So that generated a 5% increase over the prior year. That in return generated a 4.9% tax increase. So some of the challenges that we faced in calculating, if you go to the next page, in calculating our rate for this year, we had a shortfall of local revenues of approximately $523,000. We had a shortfall in other revenues of approximately $27,000. A projected 2022 shortfall of $2.5 million, and receipts from delinquent taxes shortfall of $64,000. Now, in 2022, I was able to capture another $178,000 using a 3-year average, which the state is allowing. I have $2.3 million of American Recovery proceeds that I can use in this year's budget. Unfortunately, based upon the amount of delinquent taxes that are available, I still come up $140,000 short in what I can anticipate. So of the $3.1 million shortfall, I'm able to come back with $2.3 million. Then we come down to the appropriations. As you work your way down, you'll see salaries and wages were up 7% over last year. Other expenses, 9%. Pension and Social Security, 11%. Debt service was down 13%. Deferred charges, that number is represented by the special emergencies that we had for COVID. Interlocal agreements were up 4.6%, and capital improvement fund down $50,000. And overall, there's that 5.21% budget increase. The next page shows the 3-year average of the revenues that I'm allowed to utilize this year to compensate for my shortfalls. And the last page is the trip we took, Heather and I, going through the budget to make some changes to get down to what we think is an acceptable rate, and hopefully you'll feel the same way. So we went through the departments, each department. We looked at the salaries and wages. We looked at other expenses. We moved some money around based upon what I have available in the trust account. And overall, we came up with a reduction of approximately $629,000. And on top of that, we're going to do a 6% reduction across the board for all departments in other expenses to get to a number of approximately $900,000. That proposed budget will now generate a tax increase of approximately 2.2% for the current year. So should you want to make more reductions to get that lower, then you will see that most likely that 6% reduction will have to go up, 7, 8%, depending whatever you desire. The only mystery that we still have that I'm awaiting a call back from the state on is to make sure I am within my cap. Before these cuts this morning, I was approximately $800,000 over. All these cuts don't represent cap calculations or cap reductions, so I have to go back and do the math to make sure that I'm within what I'm allowed. So with that being said, if you want, let's just focus on the tax rate and not worry about the cap yet, and we'll see where we go with that.
So that 6% reduction overall,
Yes.
What happens if we increase that to, can we like do a sliding scale here of 6.5, 7%? What's the wiggle room in that number? I'm sure there's not a lot of wiggle room, but I'd like to see what that translates into dollars.
Give me 1 second, okay?
Sure.
So every $587,000 is worth a penny on the rate.
Can you say that again?
Every $587,000 is worth a penny on the rate. So 5.8 million would be 10 cents.
Okay, maybe I wasn't clear. On the overall 6% reduction, that totals $270,000.
Correct.
If we were to make that 6.5%, what does that do to the 2.2%? What is, like, in other words, there's a value to each percentage point. There's a value to each fraction of a percentage point. So the question is, what is the dollar value of the percentage over 2% on the proposed tax increase, and then what is the dollar value of the 6% of each percentage point on that reduction? Does that make sense? Yes.
It does.
It does. I wasn't sure if it made sense to me, but it does.
No, wasn't you. I just got to get to the right sheet. Sorry.
Mhm. So I guess the easier question is, what does that have to be increased to get, to balance the two, to get that 2.2 to 2 point, right? That makes, in a more simplistic, it's like, am I thinking out loud? That's where we're going to start.
Bob, my rough and dirty math, and it's very rough and dirty, is to bring the tax rate down a full point is about $300,000. Well, if you reduced it 3 points from 5.2% to 2.2%, and you deducted $900,000, then each tax rate point is about $300,000. Tell me why I'm completely off base. You find your file.
I think if it was around 600,000.
Yeah, every time we're at a 2%, it's roughly 600. So I think Paul's probably in the ballpark, but I think that it's important to see what that reduction is there, right? Is what you're saying, right? Or the increase to get to that. So while Bob is looking at that, I just think we'll have a conversation with the people out there. Hopefully somebody's watching. So what we're looking at here is what we've reduced in order to get this tax rate reduced. We're looking at numbers of $2,400, $2,000, $5,000, $35,000, $10,000, $15,000. So these are not big numbers, but they all add up. And I think this was part of a conversation just a few nights ago, based on, I guess, Deputy Mayor Seaton and our experience with budgets, as all these little numbers add up. And Councilman Vagianos is entirely accurate that 1% is usually a reflection of about a $300,000 in dollars and cents. So it's important to understand that all these little amounts add up. So if anybody's out there listening,
They certainly do add up.
they add up. Every little dollars here, $20,000 here, $10,000 there, it adds up.
But I mean, 2.2% as it stands now is way better than last year, and it's a lot closer to being in line with what, I've experienced for the past, I guess, 7 times doing this.
Yeah.
I think we've raised our percentage of an increase minus last year has been between 1% and 2%.
Yeah, and it's a great point. We've been always for the past 7 years, you and I have been always at that lower rate, and last year presented some unique challenges as a result of COVID. But go ahead. It looks like Bob found his files, everyone, so let's back to Bob.
So I took I had $450,000 available. I had $4.5 million of other
Right.
Now, go back to the question on percentages. This would have to increase another, say, $100,000. Gets you down to $200,000. Gets you down to flat.
Wait, say that again?
So with your, put your microphone, I don't think anybody can hear clearly.
Because I haven't turned it on.
Oh, there you go. That's the reason.
That'll do it.
So I would say another $200,000 will get you to where you need to be.
So a 200 on top of the 270.
Correct?
Okay.
Is there any way just to, like, if we did a 7% reduction, what, you're saying if we do a 7% reduction, then that number is going to be 370 instead of 270?
No. 'Cause
So 7% is $315,000.
315.
$45,000 a point.
Right.
And Bob, and again, I'm still back of the envelope math. I was looking at it thinking that if we could reduce by about $100,000, that would bring us down to about 2%. I know that, again, this is your neck of the woods, not mine. So that would mean, if that was correct, if we went to an 8% overall reduction, that would bring us right about there. And again, I may be off base on this. I'm just going by the general numbers.
Yeah. That's, get you right there.
So if we increase the overall reduction to 8%, that's about that's an additional $90,000. Brings us to just a hair over 2%. And again, very rough numbers.
Right.
To go under 2% would probably be 9.
So then the question is, if we take that, so this is what we're doing, so everyone in the world understands, we're going to take our operating expenses and we're going to increase the reduction. So right now, we're at an increased reduction to what percentage?
8%.
So 8%. 8% puts us at, what is the dollar value total?
360,000.
360.
Which brings us to a tax increase of 2%.
Roughly 2%. I have to fine tune it, but that you're in the ballpark.
Give or take $1 or $2. Right.
And then if it was a 9% reduction, that would bring us to about 405,000. And what does that do to the percentage tax increase?
Whoop. That gets you to roughly 1.9 increase. 1.85.
And then the other side of that coin, because it's certainly the number we'd love to have, and I'll ask Heather, what does a 9% overall reduction do to our departments?
The thing with the 9% is, if you look at this entire list, they've already been reduced, right?
It's 9% after.
After all those
Yes,
reductions.
and that's, yeah.
And that's what's important to realize. Is that
And that's why okay, now we got to where we want to be. Do we want to be there?
right, exactly.
And that's
Because,
really,
you know, you already have reductions, and it depends on how much it is based on the overall budget for that department, but we took it from even small departments So, you know, an additional 9% reduction on a small department, even on a large department, could be a lot of money, you know?
Especially
So-
when most of these departments are salaries, which,
Right. So we didn't touch personnel
Right.
because that involves layoffs, and so that's why we're trying to get it out of OE. You know, we could go to layoffs, but I don't think that's up to
it's
you.
nobody's first choice.
If you wish to pursue that.
Well, can we just, let's go, dial this back a minute, because I think that percentage is entirely too high. I don't think we're looking to destroy, and it's entirely too much. And we're already at a very narrow margins here. We're already at a 6% reduction. I wanted to do this kind of in a sliding scale, so everyone could better understand how each percentage point increase on a reduction impacts the increase or the decrease on the proposed increase. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Can just take one step back to the if we're at a 7.5% on that reduction, let's just do that math real quick.
It's about a $57,000
Okay, let's just, go ahead, let's just look.
additional.
Well, and
Excuse me,
Mayor, if you
67.
remember, 2 years before we got on the council, there were no budget increases.
Right.
And then that first year, there was an amazing amount of complaints about the condition of our parks because, you know, we didn't have the people to get out there, the time to
Yeah.
do that. So there's a give and a take. Of course, you'd like to never increase taxes again, but in the real world, salaries go up by contracts. I mean, everything else goes up. Even using the government's made-up inflation rate of 7.5% last year, you're still well below that.
So the deputy mayor is absolutely correct, because we inherited that right on the heels of the 0%, and it took us a long time to bring the services back to what our residents had expected them to be all along. So we don't want to go, that's why we don't want to go backwards, and that's a great point. Thank you.
It's a balance.
It's a balance.
I think you're still
Everything else.
feeling some of the pain of those zero increases.
I do. I agree. I
Yeah.
think to this day we feel the impact of those 0% increases, and it was really a long haul to get back to like some sense of where we should have been. But go ahead.
So using your 7.5%, that would be a 337,500 reduction, and that brings you to about 2.02.
Okay. 2.02.
Correct.
Good. Okay. All right.
Bob, let me ask you a question, because I thought on the 7%, we said it was 2.1.
Hold on.
Oh, no, now I got it. You're right. I think I was backwards.
So it's 7%. I have 2.08.
Okay.
Okay.
So 2.0. Okay. So let's do one more. Let's go to. Sorry, Bob. How about we're going to go to 7. I'm just doing a quick math here. 0.8 reduction on that. Actually, make it 7.75. I think that's going to be the number.
So it's 348,750.
Okay, and that puts us. We needed 360.
1.99.
Oh, there we go. All right, let's go 1.99. I think I'm okay with 1.99 if we can do the 7.75. So then, so the question then is, what's the total dollar value of that?
348,750.
348. I'm going to just make it rounded up, 349. So Heather, we went from 270, so we've now added 80 to that. Okay.
Correct.
So I think the question is, where are we going to find that? How are we going to do that?
Well, we do what I did last year when we got to this point. We notified the department heads. We went in and we took a percentage off of each OE and said, this is your budget. Because you have to remember, their budget, although we delineated to have a conversation with council, it's only 2 lines, salaries and wages and other expense. They can't overexpend those. So if they have $1 million in other expense and it's made up of 5 categories, they still have only $1 million to spend. Right. We use the other guidelines internally so we can see where the money is spent out. So if I say $1 million, you've got to take 40,000 out of there, then they have 960,000 to spend over those categories.
That's a big budget. Smaller budgets, you have a lot
Again,
less
Right,
money.
and what we're talking about is an additional $80,000 to get to where we'd
Right.
like to be
Right.
over quite a number of departments, some large, some small. I mean, you're talking about some having $5,000 cuts, some having $10,000 cuts.
So don't forget the number that you calculated now, the 349,000. That's what has to be spread, not just an additional 80. The 349 has to be spread. I haven't done that yet.
I got you.
Okay.
I'm saying that this is the additional over, not just here. Let's start with over, you and Heather beat them up to get them down to the 5.2%. And then we bring them in here and you have an additional $600,000 in cuts. And then we're talking about another $300,000 in cuts. I get it. It just seems that if we're at that $900,000 mark, which is where we are looking at, don't get me wrong, it's deep, but another 80. The 80 isn't going to make the difference. It just seems to me. Give us your thoughts because you guys have to implement this.
Well, we'll implement it.
Oh, no, I know you will.
That's not the issue.
I think the question is, and I think it's a fair question, I think everyone in this room and everyone out there has had to work within a budget, and sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's painful. Does doing this make it impossible to function? Is it too much? And then is it, we don't want to do things that hurt the operations, the day-to-day operations of the village, because it's that we have staff that has to have a certain morale, and we also have folks that rely on services. So the question is, does this make it too painful and too difficult to navigate with these types of cuts?
I do not believe so.
And
I
what
don't
about-
think we touched anything that would cut services, so everything will still be maintained at the levels that the village residents are accompanying the scene. We looked at areas that, when we budgeted and we spoke with the department heads, we knew there were some soft numbers in there that we could work with. So that's what we did today. We looked at those areas that we knew had some fat in them, because they put their wish list together. So I think we'll be fine doing this.
Here, I'll put it in more concrete terms. I know one of the big issues that's come up of late is the maintenance of fields. Do we believe that this would have impact on something concrete like that, or other similar items? Because those are things that the residents would clearly see and we already have issues with.
I don't believe so.
Heather, your thoughts? My only concern is, like I said, that there are cuts prior, but Bob is more cognizant of what that'll mean for each individual department. So, and their overall budgets. So if that's where you want to get, that's where we'll get, and we'll tell them these are your cuts. and don't go over them because there's no more money.
Are we talking about any layoffs here?
No,
No.
we are not, which is good.
Which is good, which will affect things like maintenance of the fields.
Yes, but you need the supplies too to maintain them, right?
You
So-
need the seed.
Right.
Yep.
You need both. So, but yes, staff is where you really, when you cut into staff, is where you really delay or get rid of services. Definitely.
Right.
It sounds like this is, and forgive me, is this where the council wants to be?
So, yeah, I think that I'm going to just speak for myself. Well, actually, why don't we start with Pam? I'm sorry, Councilwoman Perrin, sorry.
We're talking
feel
about
casual,
a tax
must be
rate
casual.
increase of 1.99, right? I'd be willing to go a little higher than that. Like to the 2.02 with a reduction of 7.5%.
I can't hear you. Can you just?
I'm sorry. I wouldn't be averse to going to a 2.02 tax rate increase.
Okay, let's just take Mike, Deputy Mayor. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm good in this range, 1.99, 2.02, 2.08 even. I mean, that's, you gotta also realize things are going up. Everything, supplies are going up. I mean, materials are going, everything else that our employees rely on to keep the village functioning so that residents are still accustomed to the services that they're accustomed to, and they don't see any kind of reductions, or they don't see the fields getting in shabby condition, or they don't see, the downtown looking dirtier, looking like it's been kind of ignored, and they're like different areas of the village looking ignored. I mean, you have to realize that everything across the board is going up too. So
Yeah,
I think this range is well below the rate of inflation, and again, I wouldn't want to harm the residents and the services that they like or they use.
It's actually an important point. I wanted to ask that. So as the cost of materials and things are going up, and we're making these cuts, and so we're cutting, but the cost is going up, we could run into a potential issue.
We could, but Heather and I went through the detail of these departments and looked at those areas, one that were substantially higher than what we paid for last year, and it wasn't necessarily in materials and supplies. It was in various areas. And I found more often than not that departments will magnify what their wish list is, knowing that it's going to get trimmed down eventually. It's just a fact of life.
Yep.
And when you look at it and compare it to what the actual spend was last year, you have some flexibility. Now, some of the areas I did not touch were like utilities, where we know gas prices are going up,
Right.
and things like that. We left them alone. So we just, again, went through those details that you guys saw and then worked with those.
I just wanted to say one other thing. Last year, we didn't have like a full camp. We didn't have full, lifeguards. And so this year, that's what we're planning, is to do a true camp and with hundreds of kids instead of just maybe 100, I think is what it might have been, a little over 100. And so that'll take more staff and more time and more materials. Again, we're not getting into staff, I realize that, but, materials, if they're doing arts and crafts, if they're doing, games. I know we do a splash day at the pool. We do a thing with bouncy houses on the Veterans Field. So I'm just thinking there are a lot of events that didn't take place last year, and this year they will.
But
That's our
those
hope.
camps are fee-based, so we also didn't bring in the revenue for
Correct.
those. So
That's
there's a
true.
balance there. So even if we're looking at staffing and all of that, there's revenue that would be coming in.
That's true.
And I think you're asking the same question I was about to ask, which is, do we make money on the camp or do we lose money on the camp? Because if every kid that comes in, we make $1, it's different than every kid that comes in, we lose $1.
Yeah, we don't lose money on the camp.
So if we
that
don't
I'm
lose
aware
money
of.
on the camp, then increased campers,
Attendance.
it doesn't doesn't hurt the bottom line.
Right. I'm just trying to think of other events or other things that we didn't do last year that we may do this year, like Earth Day. These things also take materials, supplies. And, again, I'm not telling you which way to go. That's up to you. And honestly, whichever you choose, whether it's 7.5, the 2.02, the 1.99, we'll make it work. So that's just, your decision.
Councilwoman Reynolds, do you have any?
Hi, yeah, I'm fine with that range between the 1.99 and the 2.08. I just had a quick question. I don't know, I'm going back to last year where I think we were expecting $2 million from the state for COVID. Where is that at? Did we get any of it? If we do get it, can that, where can that go? Can it go where we want it, where we want it to go, or does the state tell us what we have to use it for?
So if you look at the second page I gave you where I talked about the revenue shortfalls, in the right-hand column you see $2.3 million of ARP money. That's the money, half we got last year, and we anticipate the other half this year.
Mm-hmm.
We've already dedicated that money to cover our revenue shortfalls, so that is included in it in my calculation for this year.
Okay, so there's no possibility of any extra money.
Not unless I get more than what I'm supposed to get.
Okay, all right. So I mean, I'm fine with that range as well. I don't want to lose any, I don't want to lose the services that the people of Ridgewood expect to have. They come to Ridgewood with certain expectations. People have lived here for 30, 40, 50 years and continue to expect certain things. I wouldn't want to see any reduction in services.
Yeah, I don't think there's any line item in here that we're suggesting be cut that would affect any programs that are presently in place. So.
Okay.
Councilman Vagianos?
Yeah, I think we're all good with the range. I think it's a matter of degree. At 7%, it's a 2.08% tax increase. At 7.5, it's 2.02, and at 7.75, it's 1.99. The difference is about $68,000. So I think we as a council have to make the determination, if that's what we're all talking about, which of those three numbers we're most comfortable with. I don't think that 2.08 is by any means a bad thing. We all love the 1.99 number just because we do. And I think everyone would love to see that. And as long as we don't, and again, I just use it as an example, as long as we don't run out of grass seed, I think we're fine. And I think that the big concern is something that Susan raised, which is with rising inflation, the grass seed that we bought in 2021 may cost more in 2022, and everything else. So that's really the discussion here. I could be swayed any way on this. I think I'd like to go with the 1.99% tax rate.
So I actually prefer the 1.99, and I'll tell you the reason is because we're sadly, we're talking about not a lot of money. And so the question is whether or not, if we go from $337,000 to $349,000, you have a $12,000 delta, whether or not that's going to make or break anything. But I think in the long run, it's not a lot of money. So if it is, we always have to look at tax increases as compounded moving forward. So, right? And so once we start talking about compounded moving forward, I think that the lower we go in the long run is better, because that becomes our base for the next go-around.
And I also, I agree with everything you said. And I think at the end of the day, on a $55 million budget, $68,000 is not something that we can't get past. That if we have problems buying whatever materials we have, it's because of the cuts that were made before the $68,000, not the last $68,000.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that the total is the 349 on the overall complete reduction. So we're not talking about necessarily 60. We're talking about 349,000, correct?
You're talking about 349,000 across the board cut for
Right.
other expenses.
Right. So but from that proposal to here is where we're talking about that lower number. And
Well,
that's the question. And that's really because this, while 68 is not a lot, 350 is a lot. But we have to draw the line somewhere.
Yep.
And let's not forget the 600,000 before the 270,
Right.
because that's part
Right.
of this number.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot going into this, and we're really only, I think we're all narrowed in on the last 68, and I don't think there's a wrong answer here.
Just remember, it's $1 million reduction, basically.
Yep.
Right, exactly. So I think what would be helpful, though, is, you know, when we're looking at this sheet, I'm looking at the last sheet. So if I look at, we'll just take, for instance, traffic and signal. 041 conference meetings, we're reducing that $20,000.
Yes.
I think it's helpful to see, because I'd have to go back to my sheets to see what the number was. And I think that this makes it a little more difficult to kind of put this in a perspective. I don't know if anyone else.
So you want it before and after?
Yeah, I think I don't know if anyone else agrees, but I kind of feel like I would like to see a before and after, because I don't know how the formula, was it, where did the formula come from? If
So-
we look at Graydon and we say materials and supplies 2,000, but where did they start at? I mean, obviously I can go back to all the sheets, that you all can go back to your binders, but I think it's a more seamless understanding if we just had it here.
So those two that you questioned, the first one, we actually talked to Rich Tolton about the amount that was budgeted. Jimmy O'Connell had created that number before he left. Rich went back, looked at it, agreed that it was probably inflated, and agreed to the $20,000 reduction. So in many of these cases, we spoke directly with the department head. That the Graydon Pool, $2,400, they wanted a new shed. And Nancy agreed that they could put that off till next year. That the one they have is, they'll make do. So, you know, we chipped through this thing with department heads, but I understand what you're saying. I'll give you a from and to. That's fair.
Yeah, I
Isn't that
just
what
think
you
it
can see?
helps everyone understand, puts it in perspective. It helps us better understand, you know, was it a $20,000 reduction from what? And then if somebody else has a $13,000 reduction from what number? I think it helps better understand, you know, the big picture. I think it becomes
Absolutely.
clearer. So I don't know if we can get
The
that.
only thing is that this is our last meeting if we're going to introduce on Wednesday. So I don't know, you know, we could get that to you before Wednesday, but at that
Yeah.
point, we're moving forward with what we decide tonight.
No, I understand that, but I think for me personally, I
Just so you
like to see,
understand fully.
understand. I think that there's a little void here for me. There's a missing piece of information that it's helpful to me. Maybe it's not helpful to anyone else. I don't know.
No,
but
I
it would be helpful.
No,
understand.
I understand. You're trying to
Yeah.
put these numbers into perspective.
Right.
To say this is, we're taking $5,000.
Yeah, I mean,
Are we
I-
taking it from $6,000 or are we taking it from $60,000?
Right, and then are you taking
Absolutely.
$20,000 from $200,000? So I think it
Yep.
helps to better understand in perspective. So if we can do that, I mean, obviously, we can all do it and go back to our binders, but it might be just quicker for rather than all of us going back and kind of doing it, if we can get that, and if we
We
can
can do
just
it.
distribute it
Sure.
in a draft, and this way we have it. I understand we're going to do this on Wednesday, and I'm good with the 1.999.
Okay.
Here's a thought, and I don't know if this is feasible. It's early. We don't have a lot to do. what if we took a recess and came back in, and I'll say an hour, but,
Yeah.
you know, how much
It won't
time
be
would
that
you need?
long.
Give Heather 10 minutes, she'll get it done.
No,
So,
give us
Half hour.
a half hour.
Yeah,
why don't we-
let's,
yeah, okay.
let's do that.
All right, that's
and
a good
then-
idea.
And then, because we need to finish this tonight.
Yes.
yeah, well, we would have finished it tonight, but I just think this just gives us that missing piece of
I think that's
information. So why don't
I
we
think
do
it's
that?
very
We can take we're going to.
Let's make it 6:15, okay? So
6:15, all
if
right.
we
So
suspend, let's
we're going to
suspend
make a motion.
this meeting right now.
Do we need a motion to suspend? A motion to
Yes.
suspend until 6:15?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Perrin,
Yes.
Reynolds,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yes.
Vagianos,
Yes.
and Newton.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'll be back. right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. The time, I'm sorry? Oh, sorry.
Wait 1 sec. Tell me. Okay.
All right, thank you. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Special Public Budget Meeting, Village Council, Village of Ridgewood. The time is 6:22 p.m.
And let me do a roll call. Councilwoman Perrin. Councilwoman Reynolds.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Here.
Councilman Vagianos.
Here.
And Mayor Knudsen.
Here. Okay. So, thank you for getting this together.
Not a problem. So the column from is the items that you saw in the budget when the departments presented it to you. And the 2 is my suggested change.
Okay, so this just shows us where we started. So, for instance, we'll go back to that $20,000 for traffic and signal. So they started at 45 and they're down to 25. Okay, I think.
But
this-
now it's going to be an additional 7.75%.
Correct.
Correct.
But again, remember, if you look at the line item, that's just one piece of other expense. So other expense in streets, for example, might be 5, 10 line items to get there. This is just one.
I think it's important to look at these as percentages from the overall number. So again, rough and dirty, and I'm just going through the first half dozen of these. It's a 25% cut, a 33% cut, 15%, 20%, 28, 45, 45, 55, 50, 30, 25, 50, 10, 20, 50, 50, 80, 100, 30, 100, and 15.
So what does 100% reduction on tax appeal, the reserve for tax appeals, what does that do? Like just so we and everyone out in the world understands, what does that do?
So for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been trying to put money into a reserve account that will pay for any tax appeals that are filed against the village, and we're not successful. So every year I put in $75,000 as my wish list. And every year we have to make adjustments, so I lose my $75,000.
I'm sorry.
So that's what that represents.
So when there is a tax appeal and we lose, where do you get then you got to go searching for money?
That money goes directly against the taxes that were collected. So if you remember when I started talking about my delinquencies in delinquent taxes, my collections, my shortfall, we had judgments against us that reduced what we collected that we thought we were entitled to. So that goes to the bottom line. That hits us directly. If I had reserve money put aside, I could pay it. It's just like terminal leave. We've accumulated reserves over time, and when we need the money, we can go back and take it. So this just happens to be one of those things that we cut when we have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so then going back to our numbers again, that
would it be helpful to you if I tried to go through each one of these and give you a rationale as to what we did?
Sure. Okay.
So in some cases, I adjusted this to what we've incurred in the prior years. So for example, police overtime reduction, we spent or we incurred less than $300,000 last year. So I said, 300 is probably a good number, and I've been, knock on wood, pretty successful in the past few years ever since they got their new time reporting system. Uncompensated pay to trust, we have money in the trust reserve that I can use in case we have payout for terminal leave. So I decided that I can put that out of trust if I need. I'll take it out of trust instead of out of here. Office and clerical, this represents a new person coming on board, but probably not till July. So this would be half the salary that we initially put in there. Streets, other contractual services. Heather, you may have to help me on a couple of these things. I'm not sure I remember what we did, why we did it. But I'll come back to streets. Traffic and signal. We had a conversation with Rich Charlton today, and he agreed that $20,000 reduction would be appropriate. Fleet overtime reductions. We looked at what the actual spend was last year and adjusted it according to that. Recycling material and supplies. Again, I have trust money that I can use to pay down for those supplies, so I moved it over to, I'm sorry, these are for barrels, and I have sufficient money in an ordinance that I can move, pay the barrels out of, so I moved the 15 over to capital. OEM materials and supplies, there was over $10,000 in there for COVID supplies, which we've accumulated, we've stockpiled, so I believe that we have more than enough money in there.
Streets you moved it to snow trust, 50,000.
Correct. So we have money in trust, snow trust, so I moved the $50,000. If I need it, I can take it out of trust. MIS, $35,000 was for a website. Accumulated leave trust. Again, I have money in the trust that if I need it, I can take $25,000 for that. Graydon, materials and supplies, and the purchase of other equipment. We had a conversation with Nancy this morning, and she agreed that those items would be appropriate to reduce. Building maintenance overtime. Again, a lot of that time incurred last year was the sanitation due to COVID, and we believe that we're on the downside of that, so we reduced that by $10,000. Elections, school security. Heather, please.
It's not as high as what we anticipated based on experience, so we're able to cut that $3,500.
And then you had conferences and meetings.
Yeah, conferences and meetings. You have to just look at that one. The miscellaneous was for someone going to Bergen Leeds. Let me just see the miscellaneous. Sorry. Oh, I know. We had put in $2,500 for, what's that, what it is? $5,000. I'm sorry, $5,000 for various department directors to go to a national conference, and they would get a certain amount, like maybe $1,500, and they would pay the difference. And we've taken that out.
So disposal fees for yard waste. Again, I have money in trust that if we need it, we can use. I told you about the reserve for tax appeals and the capital improvement fund I reduced to coordinate with the down payment that we needed for the capital ordinance that you'll be introducing Wednesday night.
So, Bob, as you're walking through this, I have three categories here and obviously you didn't just reduce these things, picking numbers out of the air. You either reduced them to 2021 levels, you had an existing cushion somewhere, or it's something that we can put off until next year. And is that basically cover?
That's correct. And again, the trust money that we have, we've stockpiled over time. It's just like when we have reserves, we put aside for the maintenance of property. So we've stockpiled them, and if we need to use them, we will. We may not need them. If we get to the point where we don't have someone that's leaving this year, we may not need any of that accumulated leave.
I got you. And Susan, thank you. This really did put it into perspective because it really shows us that, not that we don't want it, but we're not putting off buying the chemicals for the pool or things like that.
Right.
It also just goes to show us not a lot of meat on this bone, so
No.
it's but okay, let's continue. Okay.
So with that being said, the 7.75 reduction in some departments might be critical. There might be some departments that are it's going to be painful. Again, I'll do what I can where I can do it, and I'll get you to the rate that you're looking for, but just giving you a heads up, because some of the smaller ones may be struggling to do it.
Now, assume for just a moment that we went to the 7.75 with this extra $68,000 or so. Is this money that if a smaller department, say, was struggling, you can move around money to make that work for everybody?
I will make it work. I'm just giving you the heads up. Somebody, for example, like Dylan's department, his other expenses may be all subscriptions. So he's got contractual commitments for them, and he may not have any room at all to take money out of. So I'd have to take that and go to another department.
So you have to take twice as much from somebody else?
That's correct.
Yep.
I mean, I'll get it done. That's not the point.
No, I understand.
I just want you to understand the impact of it. It could, it'd be troublesome for some departments to allow for that.
I believe that if you clearly have the flexibility to move things around, that the $68,000 is not going to be the difference maker. The difference is the stuff that we've already agreed to. And personally, I'm comfortable with going with the 1.99% tax rate. I don't know what the rest of the council feels like.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I am too.
Plus, there's budget transfers at the end of the year, so if somebody doesn't spend as much as you anticipate, and for whatever reason somebody overspends or they need more money, then that's why we do budget transfers at the end of the year, to kind of move that around and, I guess, mirror the budget more towards reality as you're going through. Because right now here we sit a year till the end of this budget gets completed, and it's hard to say what might pop up, what emergencies you might have, what things you might not have to get, what things maybe you can't get for whatever reason, so you can't spend the money. So that's why, it's a big enough budget where you could definitely, people spend money, people don't spend money, and then that way you kind of even everything out by the end of the year. So yeah.
So just real quick, if we just, one more quick calculation. If we go to 7.65 on the reduction, do we get it to a 2.0 flat? Because, when you look at the reason I'm asking is because when you look at these numbers and you see $2,000 and $5,000, you're looking at like small amounts of money. So those little amounts of money could mean, no? I'm trying to get my chart up here so I can do the math a little bit more quickly, but it's probably going to be the difference just for a couple of $1,000s, but it might be just worth it to.
I'm sorry, what percentage you want to use? 2.6?
No, 7 point.
I would have put that in a second.
Sorry.
That's okay. Puts me at 2% on the nose.
There you go. All right, I was right. Okay, good.
You
I
knew
think that,
that.
and I know. I did it real quick in my head, but I wasn't sure, so I'm glad. Okay. Okay.
Is that what you
So
want?
that's
7.65?
7.65%?
And that puts us, that should make up the difference for, it's just a couple $1,000s, right?
Yes.
What's the dollar value on that?
344, 250.
Right. So I say, because some of these numbers are such tiny little numbers that it might be just, let's make 2.0, not 1.999, and let's just do the 2.0 and we're good. Is that okay with everyone?
No, I'm still, again, we really are parsing pennies. I think that the community would have a feel-good moment to be under a 2% tax increase. Again, now it's just a question of, again, it's the difference between 1.99 and 2% is really just what number do you want? Because it's not going to have any impact on the budget, and I think that our community would really enjoy having that 1.99 number.
It's 1/100%. I mean, and really 1.99% is basically 2%. I mean, you could say it's under 2%, but it's 1.99%. I mean, I'm like I said, I was good with a range between 1.99 or 2.08. So I mean, if you guys want to sit here and fight about,
It's a couple of $1,000s, and I actually
couple
agree with the
pennies.
deputy mayor. I think that if we think that people are foolish enough to think that 1.9999 isn't 2.
I got a coin to flip.
I don't think we should flip coins on a tax increase.
But I'll take the money to put into Myrna.
you can
So let's
donate
hear
that
from,
way.
look, it's 6 of one, half dozen to me. I just thought the couple of extra dollars, look, we see, again, we get to these points where we say $8,000 here, $10,000 there, it all adds up, and, the question is, it's probably 6 of one, half dozen to me. If it's 1.99 or 2.0, it's 2.0 for the world, but if somebody feels strongly that we should present it as 1.99, that's a call everyone's got to make. So, Councilwoman Reynolds, what are your...
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're looking at these things, and some of the departments, they had 7,500 and 3,500 is being taken away from them, or they had 4,800 and half is being taken away. So if doing the 2.0 and, having an extra $3,000, if that can help the smaller departments not to have to shift things around, and, 2.0 and 1.99 do mean the same thing. So I'm fine with the 2.0.
So I just want to ask Councilman Vaggiano, would this difference of this fractional percentage point make or break a vote for you? I mean, is this a moment where you would say, I wouldn't vote for this because it's...
I don't hear it. Somebody said, we're going to fight over this. I'm not going to fight over this. I just think, like I said, I like the 1.99 number. It makes absolutely no difference to the small departments, to the big departments, to anybody else except the perception. And I advocate for the 1.99, and that's fine. And if the council wants to go with 2%, that's the council's choice. Like I said, this is not a question of being more fiscally prudent for 1/100th of a percent. That is absolutely not the case here.
Well, I just want to know, so you would support the 2.0?
No, I vote for the 1.99.
Okay, so if we go to 2.0, you're going to vote no?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't want to see that, because this is like kind of this semantics thing where we're looking for sound bites and things. So we'll go with the 1.99 so that nobody has to be skewered while other people skate on a fraction of a percentage point. It's fundamentally unfair to do to council colleagues, Boone, when they're being responsible.
All right, so it's 1.99,
All right.
and it's the 7.75%.
And just for the world
Additional.
out there, when our budget doesn't pass, it's a whole big other issue. So there are, you have to act responsibly as well when you're up here, so. All right, that's it. I guess we'll go back to First, let's say thank you to everyone during that little brief moment. You really put this together, and was a tremendous help putting in perspective, so we appreciate that. And with that, we will go back to public comment. There is no one here from the public. We wish the public were here. Is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Thank you.